we mustn't underestimate the human mind's ability to bullshit itself into any position. You can prove to me anything, but if it doesn't apply to what I need, I'm going to immediately reject it and I'll justify doing so.
Ladies and gentlemen, today I have Dr. Hanan Bushkin on the podcast, and I was on his podcast and I did a long rant, but I'm very much more interested today in doing a lot of listening because Dr. Bushkin is a jiu-jitsu practitioner, but he's also a clinical psychologist specializing in trauma and anxiety. And certainly in these times, there's a whole lot of trauma and anxiety for everyone, regardless of what side of this political divide, of this tribal divide that we're on. You're in South Africa, Dr. Bushkin, and I'm sure that you're dealing with the exact same level of division and conspiracism and rage that we're dealing with in the Northern Hemisphere. Do you think that's fair? Do you think there's a difference of what you're dealing with down there compared to us up here?
No, I think obviously communities certainly shape our perception and worldviews, but they're communities within communities. At the end of the day, we are all human beings and we're united by very similar psychology. So the things that worry you, that threaten your survival up there, is the thing that worry us, that threaten our survival down here. So we can certainly share common fears and common worries, especially with this dominant topic of COVID, for sure.
Okay. Well, can we just position this? I want to talk mostly about sort of tribalism and anxiety and how we can possibly ever come together about this. But just to position you, can you spend a few minutes just talking about the COVID situation in South Africa? Because I don't think many of the listeners are necessarily that familiar with what's going on down there right now.
Right. So maybe as a broad brushstroke, our population is 60 million. A little bit over 10% have been vaccinated. The way the government has structured it is it's given the citizens a 5-level perspective. Level 5 being most stringent laws and most stringent restrictions. Level 4, 3, 2, and 1 pretty much open up the country. We are at the moment at level 3, moving to level 2, and our approach to the vaccine and COVID is a very scientifically based, whilst there's still incredible hesitation to be vaccinated in the country. But we worry about it. We worry about it as any other nation around the world. But I think we're on the right track to not only change the minds of those that are hesitant or those that are maybe perhaps are not scientifically minded or based, but we're on the right track for sure as per the levels of restrictions going down.
Okay. Now, I don't know that much about this, but I do remember hearing about all these crazy conspiracies around AIDS in South Africa and ways that you catch AIDS and ways that you can get rid of AIDS, and that this is a government plot. Was that just sensationalized here in the North, or was there a true undercurrent of conspiracism around viruses in South Africa in the last couple of decades?
Well, due to our history of apartheid, the general sentiment is government cannot be trusted. We've had a long history of government taking control, government trying to manipulate, government trying to take power against their own citizens. So especially within the South African context, we are very hesitant to trust government. And whether that might be through the science or the scientific knowledge about HIV AIDS, and now this COVID vaccines or the COVID pandemic, we as South Africans, we're hesitant to trust what government says, especially the less educated in the population, because they don't have the available resources that perhaps the educated or the affluent have in this country. So I think everything is sensationalized all around the world because we tend to focus on the thing that's kind of the topic of conversation. But as a general perspective, we are very hesitant to trust government, and it was so with the HIV pandemic or the HIV treatment and the HIV virus, as well now as the COVID vaccine.
Okay. So thank you for providing the perspective on South Africa. In terms of I call it a drive towards conspiracism, right? This need to see, evil men, smoking cigarettes in the back room, controlling everything. As a psychologist, where does this come from? What need does that serve to think that there's somebody controlling everything, that, Mr. Pfizer is telling 100 public health organizations and 1 million scientists all around the world what the results are that they should be finding? This it's kind of crazy, because if you ever worked in a small organization, trying to get 5 people to do what you want them to do is hard enough. Trying to get 5 million people to do what you want them to do is impossible.
Right. So, Stephan, tribalism is a very primitive psychological need for human nature. Our number one drive on a subconscious level is survival. And 200,000 years ago, we've learned that we survive in groups. So therefore, we naturally attach ourselves to people that look like us, that sound like us, that speak like us, that do what we do. And that's the basis of tribalism. We attach ourselves to people who are like us and want the same things as us. Now, that certainly has served us really well 200,000 years ago, and it's quite non-nefarious. It's a lot of fun when you use tribalism to support your favorite soccer team, or use tribalism to support your favorite restaurant, or your favorite game show on TV, and everybody comes together and does and engages with the same thing. But when it comes to tribalism and it's used for nefarious reasons, racism, xenophobic attacks, country against country, vaxxers against anti-vaxxers, that's when we see a big problem, because we tend to pick sides. And the more the one side tries to shove an idea down the other side's throat, the more we hold on even stronger to our position. So whilst tribalism can be used for good, and it has been used for good, if we don't regulate it, it can be actually used to harm us. It can actually become a self-destructive thing, because we're holding on to ideas, positions, goals, objective purposes that actually don't serve us at all. What was your question again?
I'm just trying to understand the drive towards conspiracism, but the pivot to talking about tribalism is just as interesting to me. I think you're definitely onto something, that we're kind of wired for living on the African savannah in groups of 50 to 100. And now here we are in the worldwide web of 7 billion or 8 billion people connected by the internet. And we're dealing with outmoded programming in a very, very different environment from anything we've ever experienced.
For sure. And conspiracy theories, and by the way, we know that those that hold on to conspiracy theories are on the fringe of society. They're very extreme. So we know from research that people that believe wholeheartedly that Princess Diana was murdered, those are the people that believe wholeheartedly that she's still alive. So we know that people who believe in conspiracy theories on the extreme, they are really, their personalities, their makeup is extreme in nature, and they really live on the fringe of beliefs. The big message that I'd like to bring across is that this notion of tribalism, as I said, can really serve us a great deal. It can serve a great utility. But when used in the wrong way, as I said, it can really harm us. And unfortunately, with this pandemic, or with this vaxxers versus anti-vaxxers, what we've done, we've taken a really richer, complex issue, and we've divided into two factions: vaxxers versus anti-vaxxers. And I think that is a psychological mistake, because there are many people, as a matter of fact, most people that don't live on the fringe. There's somewhere in the middle. Through my interviews with my patients, through my own research, we found that people say to me in private, Hanan, I'm not an anti-vaxxer, but I'm afraid of needles. Hanan, I'm not an anti-vaxxer, but how do we know Pfizer has my best interest at heart? Hanan, I'm not an anti-vaxxer, but how do I know that once I take the vaccines, that it's not going to harm me in 20 years' time? But what we do in social media is we go, well, you're either with us or you're against us. You're either a pro-vaxxer or an anti-vaxxer. And what that does is it pushes people into positions that they don't want to be in. Because what we are doing is if you don't fully get vaccinated and you don't believe in it, then you're on the other side. And now you never mind, don't believe what I believe, but now you're my enemy. Now I see you as less than me. And the moment you see anybody as less than you, they rebel. Nobody wants to be seen as less than anybody else. And then they hold on to their position. And whilst they were not anti-vaxxers before, now they live in this cognitive bias that maybe I should be because that is where my position is accepted. We all have, I said earlier that we all have a need for survival. And one thing that generates or creates us our survival or ensures our survival is the ability to be accepted by the group. And the moment I don't accept you, Stephan, then you will look for someone that does. You will look for somebody that does. And I think a big issue that I found is this: you're either with me or you're against me mentality. And even the conspiracy theorists, it's not like you either believe it or you don't. The truth is there's a million other positions in between, and we should take individuals as individuals and not push them into structures or push them into positions perhaps that they don't feel that they belong into.
Yeah. I agree that there's this spectrum of belief. There's the people who believe every single, like you said, at the far end, there's somebody who believes every conspiracy out there, including contradictory ones. I love your example of the Princess Diana one, and I can think of other ones that are automatically conflicting. And then there's a spectrum of beliefs. And let's just go down the vaccine thing, because it's something that I've obviously been spending a fair bit of time fighting about online. And yeah, there's people who are just concerned, like they've been told, I don't know, this is going to change your DNA. There's people who hate needles. There's people who go, well, I've had COVID. Shouldn't that count as a vaccine? I was told that it's the same. And so it's not as simple as I believe, I don't believe. But from a policy point of view, if we're a government trying to decide who gets to go to a concert, we've got these, we're in Canada and large parts of the States, we're in the middle of the fourth wave right now. I don't know when people are going to be listening to this. So there are hospitals that are on the verge of crashing. There are hospitals that have decided to do not resuscitate, because they just can't spend the time doing CPR on one person when they need other people to have them in the bed. So from a policy kind of point of view, you do need to divide. Are we going to let, people come in to work here in person, or are they going to have to work from home? And it can't be on the basis of, well, you're afraid of needles and you're not vaccinated, so we'll let you come in. It has to kind of be binary, yes or no. So I think from a policy point of view, it ends up often being a binary decision. Or am I oversimplifying that?
No, I think you are quite right, Stephan. I think that from a policy perspective, you can't cater for a million different needs at a million different times in a million different environments. It's just not practically feasible or possible. So I think on a policy level, they make it as simple as possible to be able to administer and create rules for: if you behave in X, we allow X. If you behave in Y, we don't allow Y. So I understand from a policy perspective, but my interest is how do you get people to do and to follow pursuit because they want to. So there are really two ways to get somebody to do what you want them to do. You either force them to do it, and there's grades of that, or you get them to want to do it. And of course, the road of least resistance is to get people to want to follow pursuit, to want to do it. And understand in terms of government's perspective and policy, you can't wait 4 years until somebody goes to therapy and wants to do something, I understand. And therefore they have to simplify it. But I'm really interested in my work on how do you get people to want to do it with the tools that we have psychologically, with the carrot or the stick. So you incentivize people to want to do it because it's an internal need, as opposed to hold the stick and force them to do it, because if you don't do it, you're not allowed to come to this restaurant. If you don't do it, you can't come to this country. If you can't do it, you can't watch this show. So what's that internal mechanism that makes people want to do it?
Mm-hmm. And what have you found the biggest levers to get people to change their minds on this? Is it, I guess you're saying it's individual. If I'm afraid of needles, we got to work through that. If I'm afraid of some crazy thing I read on Facebook that there's microchips in this vaccine, we got to work through that. And that's a separate process.
For sure. So I can offer you and your listeners two examples of what we found to be the most effective in motivating people to want to do it, whatever it means. One is you get a person of authority within the group that motivates that kind of behavior. So naturally, if I'm a biker, as an analogy, and I'm not a biker, and I have a certain position that I take, if somebody from outside of the group tells me to do X, I'm naturally going to rebel because I don't trust anybody, the tribalism, I don't trust anybody from outside the group to have my best interest at heart. But if I have somebody from within my group tell me to do X, the guard is already down. I already trust the person to have my best interest at heart because we are part of the same group. We are part of the same tribe, so to speak. And then it's much more palatable for me to want to follow that person's advice, because there isn't that cognitive wall of what does he want from me? What does he want to steal from me? What does he want to take from me because this person is part of the group? So that's the first way in which we get somebody to want to do something. And as you know,
that could work both ways. Like that could work for good and for evil. That's just
for sure,
a mechanism.
for sure. And that's why political leaders have tremendous responsibility, because people that follow them, people who are part of their tribe, see them as the authority, and whatever comes out of their mouth, they hold as gospel. So if a leader tells me within my group, not outside of my group, because outside of my group I don't trust that, but if a leader within my group tells me to do X, I'm much more likely to believe it and not even do my own research than if somebody outside of my group. That's why leaders, politicians have tremendous responsibility to say things that are responsible and reliable and certainly backed by science. The other way in which we get people to do it, now you might say to me, rightfully so, but what if I'm not a biker, using my analogy? What if I'm not inside your group and you don't trust me? That's when we have to be a little bit psychologically savvy. And what I mean by that is there's a concept in psychology called need bidding. Need bidding. And the way need bidding works is relationships work because we fulfill each other's needs. So I'm going to get home tonight, and my wife will say to me, "Why are you so late?" What she's ultimately saying is, "Hey, I need your help with the kids." And the mistake, and I'll just use relationships and I'll get to the question in a second. The mistakes that happen in relationships, we don't actually fulfill the need that needs to be fulfilled, because my wife was actually not saying to me, "I want you to come home earlier." She's actually saying, "I want your help with the kids." Because even if I come home earlier, there'll be a sense of disconnect, and I'm not going to fulfill, because the whole point is not me coming home earlier. The whole point is me helping with the kids. And the moment I help with the kids, doesn't matter what time I come home, suddenly my wife feels a sense of fulfillment because those needs are being fulfilled. In order to get somebody on your side, and a lot of the times in relationships we miss the point. A lot of the time on our side as relationships, we don't fulfill each other's needs. And within the COVID context, we got to understand, if you want somebody to be able to get from point A to point B, you want to understand what is it that they need. What is it that they need? Now, Stephan, yes, does it take time to understand it? Absolutely. Does it take effort? Absolutely. Can government do that with every single individual? Probably not, because it's just too time consuming. But if you really want to get somebody on your page, somebody to understand it, or to move from point A to point B, understand exactly what is it that they need. And you'll see 100 different people, 100 different skeptics when it comes to COVID will have 100 different needs that they need fulfilled. And yes, whilst it's not practical to fulfill that, if you want to get somebody from point A to point B, whilst they want to do it, you've got to understand what their need is.
I think in terms of fulfilling needs, I've been arguing a long time that a large part of the skepticism within the jiu-jitsu community is financially driven, right? If there was a financial incentive to deny that this was ever a thing, because that way you could keep your club open, you could keep the business that you had built running as normal, you could keep on feeding your family. And when I take a look at how much conspiracism there is around COVID and anti-vax sentiment and then, sorry, I'll jump back a step. So after having denied COVID, this then puts you into the tribe, which is also not only COVID denial, but anti-mask and anti-vaccine as well. That's, I know it's more subtle than that, but that's kind of a group. So then countries where there was more support for small businesses, where there were more small business loans available, it seems to me, and I've not done a formal analysis of this, that those countries had less pushback and less conspiracism within the community. They had more. So you could argue, I think, by using your language, that the needs of the influencers, the needs of the gym owners weren't being met. Fundamentally, how the hell do I keep this place open
Completely.
when I have to be closed? So it's not 100% explanation of why everyone ended up where they were, but I would bet $1,000 that countries that provided more support for small business had less pushback from small business and now have dealing with less anti-mask, less anti-vaccine, less COVID denial pushback.
So, Stephan, what we have to accept is that needs are always based on a hierarchy. And the most prominent and the most important ones we are driven to meet first. So if, for example, I take away your oxygen and I take away your food, you are not going to be looking for the next McDonald's. You are going to be driven and motivated to get oxygen because your need for oxygen on a hierarchy is much higher than your need for food. Even though you do have a need for food, but the need for oxygen is much higher on that rating or that hierarchy. And what we have to accept is that if you want to motivate someone to get what you want, or to get them from move, never mind what you want, but get them to move from point A to point B, find out exactly what they need as their highest on the highest hierarchy. So going back to your gym owners example, what they needed was for their business to survive. That was their number one need. That was their oxygen. The health of their members was perhaps an important aspect, but certainly not number one. It was, using our analogy, it was their food need. But that could wait. We'll deal with that later on. They just needed their businesses to survive. And if government came along and said, we recognize that that is your number one need, let me show you how we can satisfy that and give you oxygen, you'll have a lot more buy-in from not just the gym owners, but from anybody that's looking to satisfy those needs.
You're basically talking Maslow's hierarchy here, right?
For sure. But it's not just Maslow's. I mean, we have multiple needs, from a sense of purpose to financial security to family to friends, romantic relationship, diet, exercise, and sleep. There are plenty, but again, on a subconscious level, we put on a hierarchy and we strive for the top ones.
So obviously some of those needs are going to be conflicting, right? In this room is the oxygen, in that room is the food. I need both. There's a conflict, but I'm just going to prioritize for the thing I need first, the thing
That's exactly how it psychologically works. And again, and if you come along and you lock that room, the oxygen room, I don't feel good about it just because I'm in the food room, because that's not the need that I need fulfilled at this present moment. And naturally, what I'm going to feel is a sense of anger and resentment, even hatred. And look what's happening in the world today. We are, drop the title of pro versus anti. What we are doing, or what government is doing, is locking the rooms and saying, well, you can't come into this room. You can't financially look after your family. And I'm giving that as an analogy, of course. And people are feeling incredibly angry, incredibly resentful at government because you're taking what I need, not what I want. There's a big difference between a want and a need. A want can wait. I want a nice fancy car. Tomorrow I might want it more. Tomorrow I might want it less. And need doesn't go away. If you don't eat today, tomorrow you're going to need it even more. The next day you're going to eat it even more. You're going to need it even more, and so on and so forth. And need doesn't go away. And when you take away not my want, my need, the natural reaction is anger, because you take away my resources for survival, and the natural reaction is I need to fight you back.
So with something like oxygen versus food, it's pretty obvious which comes first, right? Oxygen. um, oxygen, food, then somewhere down there is, self-actualization. Not too many people are going to, go into the self-actualization room before they have their oxygen need filled. But is everybody's hierarchy equivalent? I'm assuming that there's a large need to be part of a group, that is a level of need, a tribe with which one can identify. But might my need to, support my family be above or below my need to be part of a tribe? And that might you be different. Like for the real obvious physiological ones, it's pretty obvious which comes first. But for the more psychological needs, how similar are human beings?
So we are incredibly similar. And removing the physiological needs, there are 8 specific psychological needs, or we call them anchors. Anchors are things that you and I hold on to that makes us feel in control. So we have 8 in total. One is a sense of a career and a structure that a career gives us, a sense of purpose, financial security, relationship with family, relationship with friends, romantic relationships, the need to eat healthy diet, exercise, and sleep. And which one is more important? If I had to rate the health anchors, the diet, exercise, and sleep would be number 1. And the relationship anchor, that's family, friends, romantic, and career and financial security, they're equal in importance. But to your question, which are more important for you versus me? It's the one that's missing. All of these 8 anchors are satisfy a particular psychological nutrient. I call them the 8 taps in your life. So I have all these 8 taps. I have career, financial security, family, friends, romantic, diet, exercise, and sleep. And these are the 8 taps that give me that psychological nutrient. So I'll wake up in the morning and I turn on my kids tap, and then I turn on my wife's tap, and I come to work and I get the sense of purpose, and I get that sense of belonging from that. And then I go home and I go meet a friend and I get that friendship tap. I don't access all these taps all the time, but it's incredibly psychologically relieving to know that the taps are available to me. So you don't you just use your water tap at home all the time because you're not thirsty all the time, but it's incredibly comforting to know that if you're thirsty, you just turn on the tap and it's available. And a great situation is when all these taps are available to me. Not a great situation is when one of these taps are not accessible to me. And what ends up happening, and people are very resilient, they just overcompensate. So it's the guy that doesn't have a romantic relationship, but he'll work 18 hours a day. Or somebody that doesn't have friendships, but they'll go to the fridge and watch Netflix and eat ice cream. So we overcompensate if a need or a psychological nutrient isn't being fulfilled. But the worst of all is not when the tap is not available, but rather when the tap is inconsistent. because that's what we create. That's when the mind creates what we call anticipatory anxiety. That's when I don't know when it's going to be available, when it's not, and I naturally live in an anxious state. So to come back to your question, as human beings, are we very similar in terms of what taps we need? Absolutely. Whether you live on the one side of the universe or the other side of the universe, we all need those 8 taps. Nobody can deny it. But what you need in that particular moment is dependent on which tap is missing in your life.
Okay. In your practice, you're working with individuals who are dealing with trauma and anxiety. How much in the last 2 years have you dealt with relationships that have shattered because one person's a pro-vaccine, the other's anti-vaccine, because one person has listened to, I don't know, Joseph Mercola, and the other person has listened to Anthony Fauci. I see this a fair bit in my circle, but I'm wondering if I could only imagine the difficulty of watching, I don't know, from your perspective, your wife going totally down the rabbit hole in what you consider to be the wrong direction, how insanely stressful that must be.
Right. So, Stephan, in most relationships, and I'm saying 99% of the arguments are about topics that we can agree or we can agree to disagree, where perhaps it's, when they say relationships are 50-50, it's not true. Relationships could be 80-20 or 80-20 the other side, or 50-50 or 100-0. Sometimes there's certain things that I've got to relinquish complete control when it comes to my relationship with my loved ones or my wife. And sometimes there's a situation where she has to relinquish complete control, and we dance it out. We dance it out. So it's like me saying to you, using jiu-jitsu as an example, when should you use maximum force? Well, your answer will be, well, it depends. It depends. Depends on that moment of the dance. And in relationship, it's exactly the same thing. And in relationships, most topics, you'll find a way to compromise and get creative and agree on a position. 1% of the time, there's no ways to agree to disagree, because agreeing to disagree is incredibly consequential for the relationship. So, for example, as a generic example, if I see a couple and the husband believes that having an affair is completely appropriate, the wife believes that it's inappropriate, there's no ways of meeting halfway, or you know what, let me just have an affair once a year or once every 2 years, just to kind of meet you somewhere on that continuum of appropriateness versus not. So there's certain topics that we can't come to an agreement. It's either my way or it is your way. And the vaccines are exactly the same thing,
Your
because there's
kids,
no
your
way.
kids are your kids are either getting vaccinated or they're not. It's binary.
It's binary. Exactly. And it's consequential. It's consequential. So it's very important. Not only is it binary, but it's consequential, because if I'm living with you and you're not getting vaccinated, that has an impact on my world. So if you are a smoker and I'm not a smoker, if we're living together, we can't agree to disagree. You do what you do, I do what I do. It just doesn't work that way, because your decision impacts on my world. So those are some of the topics that you can't agree to disagree. You have to commit to position A or position B, and we can't agree because it's consequential. So to answer your question, have I seen a lot of those cases? In most cases, my couples that I see, whether it's friends living together or couples obviously living together, they're able to come up with a position where they're both relinquishing control. They're both relinquishing some sort of control. So to give you an analogy or as an example, I've had a couple and the wife was pro, the husband was very hesitant, and the decision that they came up with is, let's go and consult person X that we trust and let him make a decision for us. They both agreed on it. The person advised them to go get vaccinated, and they both had to relinquish. So the wife had to relinquish control by not forcing an idea down her husband's throat. The husband relinquished control by obviously getting vaccinated, and they were both fine. But there are some cases, by the way, where you just have to understand that this is going to create a breakdown in values and a breakdown in trust. So where I
What do you
believe
mean a
one.
breakdown in values?
So there are specifically six fundamentals for any relationship, romantic relationship to work. So I'll answer your question in a second. So there's trust, common shared values, compromise, intimacy, attraction, and communication. So those are the six that have to be there for a relationship to survive. You can't have five out of the six. You got to have all six. So the one of the most important ones, they're all, by the way, important. I use the analogy of a car. You can't have a car with just three out of the four tires. You got to have all tires. Just because you have 75% of the tires, which sounds quite good, the car's going nowhere. You need to have all tires. So these are the six fundamentals for any relationship. And common and shared values, we both want the same thing for our future, has to be aligned. So if I want X for our future, my partner wants Y for our future, we're naturally going to utilize strategies that are in opposite in value. So I'm going to obviously work at getting to X. My wife is going to work at getting to Y, and it just doesn't work. And then again, an analogy that I can use is if I want to dance a particular dance, the rumba, and my partner wants to dance the foxtrot, well, there will be naturally there's going to be conflict. So what ends up happening is that in relationship, when we talk about the vaccines or COVID, is when I believe in getting vaccinated because of X, Y, and Z, that is how I see my future, and my partner does not, we obviously not going to converge on the same value system on the outcome for our family or for our relationship. And kids certainly complicate things even further or make them more complex. And whenever we don't converge on values, that is when the distrust comes in. That is when there's breakdown in communication, and suddenly I begin to question your position in the relationship. Are you doing X because you love me, or are you doing X because you want to service your position? So, and by the way, that's what's happening now. If you just kind of turn it back to COVID, that's why there's such a great distrust of government, because now government says let's get vaccinated, or the big pharma says let's get vaccinated, and individuals specifically that distrust big governments and the elites are going, why are you telling me this? How do I trust that you and I have the same values and want the same thing? So in relationship, to go back to your question, when you don't converge on the values, there's naturally going to be distrust and resentment.
Okay. But then what's the route forward for that hypothetical couple that I don't know whether the mother has been on Facebook more than the father, and the mother is just anti-vaccine, COVID skeptic, wants to put the kids on ivermectin, and the husband wants to do kind of the standard public health thing, which is, get vaccinated and don't take ivermectin. How can they bring that together? Like, what would be the steps? I mean, they can't fly to South Africa to see you necessarily. So what would be a more generic approach towards reconciliation?
So ultimately, you want to, first of all, and you want to believe that the other person has the relationship's best interest at heart. If you don't know that, then you got to question whether you can actually sit in the same room and you both want to have the same outcome for your relationships. And by the way, most of the time when I see couples, of course they want the best thing for the relationship, but they don't agree on what that looks like. So most of the time, as I said, we are able to find creative solutions together in the therapy, but very rarely we're not able to, because the wife holds on to her position, the husband holds on to his position. He's got his facts and she's got her facts, and he's got his research and she's got her research, and they're holding on to it for dear life. And they really believe their position. They really believe their position. And your question is, well, what do we do? Well, I always try to advise that find a trusted person that will create the tiebreaker. Find the one person that you're both prepared to trust. This could be a person of authority, a mentor, a parent, but somebody that once they tell you to go route A or route B, then you will follow it. And understanding that because it's so binary, someone is going to feel hard done by. Somebody is going to feel that their position was not taken for granted, but they commit before the meeting to agree to that tiebreaker. It's not ideal. I must tell you, Stephan, it's not ideal because somebody's coming out as a loser in this debate. Ultimately, we want to find creative ways to find a way that leaves both people a little bit unhappy. Both people have compromised, but you're both heading in the same direction.
So that was a hypothetical question because I'm not dealing with that. But like many other people, I think pretty much almost everybody I talk to, there are people I know who I've watched spiral off into deep, deep, deep conspiracy land, off towards the extreme, right? Princess Diana is dead, was murdered, and she's alive. Every government in the world is getting its marching orders from Dr. Fauci. Every public health organization is lying to you. Every scientist is lying to you. The climate, the earthquakes are being controlled by Aurora Borealis research satellites. The entire financial system is controlled top to bottom by lizards. What strategies do you have to help bring those people back? Because yeah, it's one thing to have some crazy lunatic in a trailer with a wall full of pictures and lines connecting them all, but it's quite another when that person is a family member or a friend member and you've watched them spiral off and self-isolate. Although I guess your point is they're not necessarily self-isolating. They're identifying with a different tribe now that's online, mostly. But advice for bringing those people back into the, the social sphere of the family, of the friend group. Is that even possible?
So it is possible and it's incredibly effective. But what we cannot do is we cannot demonize the people that don't believe what we believe. Doesn't matter that you know that the earth is round. We have such an inclination to talk to flat earthers and see them as stupid or see them as uneducated and less than us. And by actually seeing somebody and treating them as less than you, they will hold on to their position even tighter. So you can have your point of view, that's perfect, and I accept anybody else's point of view. And if it has no bearing on my existence and it's inconsequential, then dance naked in the rain. I don't care. It doesn't bother me. If you want to do X and you want to do Y, it doesn't matter. But the moment it starts infringing on my rights, then I want to get you into my camp. And the
But
worst
that's exactly what we've seen, right? All these fringe beliefs, flat earthers, 3 years ago didn't really matter. The fact that flat earthers, then almost every flat earther I know, immediately went to COVID denial, anti-mask, anti-vax. The fact that became a group that now does have political consequences, it does have personal consequences, it does have consequences for the healthcare system. That belief that's kind of kooky and out there, and oh yeah, okay, that's just Fred with this flat Earth thing, then turns into something that is very relevant, that does impact not only the relationship but society. Just like you were saying, it's one thing for the wife to believe that oil of oregano will cure a cold, but it's quite another when it comes down to, do we get vaccinated for measles, mumps, and rubella, or take basic precautions? So
for sure.
I have difficulty being as open-hearted as you when there are actual political, social, and medical consequences. That's where I break down.
For sure. So as I said to you, your position is you believe your position wholeheartedly, and you will live and die by your position. But just understand that the people that hold on to the Earth is flat theory hold on to their position even more so, perhaps the same or even more so than you are holding on to your position. And the reason why I'm saying even more so is because they're in their minority and their identity is at stake. So you want to take what grounds me, you want to take away my resource that makes me feel anchored in the moment, you want to take away my identity, you forget about it. That's not happening. And whilst your position might be right for you, and I'm not saying you have to accept their position. Your question was, do I have to accept? Your question was, how do I bring them more to kind of an open mindset? And the way to do it is certainly not to jump on their boat or on their ship or kind of believe what they believe, but understand what is it that they're fearing of letting go of. What are they fearing? If they let go of the belief that the earth is flat, or vaccines are bad, or government is there to harm us, or they're injecting 5G into our system, if you let go of that belief, what are you going to lose? And what can I, as a person, plug in that will make you feel more secure with that loss? Because if you want to make somebody do X, you want to create more value than they currently have. So you want to create more value than the current system that they currently hold. But remember, that's a tough task, because to let go of an old belief and to jump onto a new belief requires the person to go through an incredible amount of grief and cognitive dissonance. So your value proposition needs to be so good that they have no choice and they want to jump. But I go back to my need bidding analogy. You want to find out exactly what they're needing that is fulfilled by their belief. And you might go, well, what they're holding on to is a sense of belonging to that community. Great, great. That's incredibly powerful. To know that that's what somebody is holding on to, now you can start working with that and offering them a sense of belonging, perhaps an even stronger sense of belonging somewhere else. And I recognize that a lot of people are going to listen to this and go, who the fuck has time for that? I mean, I don't have to, I don't have the time to kind of understand what people's needs are, what they want, how they want it. I just don't have the time. And I get it. I get it. But if you truly want to motivate someone to go from point A to point B, you have to give them what they need on that level, on that high level hierarchy.
So then let's just stick with flat Earth, right? And let's assume for the moment that this flat earther is not in charge of something that could have disastrous outcomes. That flat earther is not in charge of the space program. That flat earther is not in charge of deciding how a 747 flies from South Africa to Europe. There's no consequences to that belief. What is that person giving up? You mentioned he's giving up membership in a group, right? Maybe that's an online group. Maybe that's a sense of belonging. If he were to give up the flat Earth thing, what else would he be giving up? My instinct is to say that there's a sense of power that comes from having a secret, or having the secret knowledge, right? Whether you're a Freemason, a 87th level Scientologist, or a flat earther, you have access to that secret information that most of the world doesn't understand, and that makes you feel special. Is that an example of something else that they would have to then give up?
So the major thing, and it's not as simple. It's not as simple letting go. It's their sense of identity, what they identify themselves as, even if there were nobody else around, and they didn't perhaps have that need for the group, because some people don't have a need for the group. They have a need for belonging, but perhaps not to that particular group. People have a desperate need to hold on to their identities. I am. So if I say to you, Stephan, so tell me about you. You would start the sentence with I am, I do, I. However way you're going to finish a sentence, that's your identity. That's what we define as your identity. And we hear this: I am a Christian, or I am a Jew, or I am a vegan, or I'm a jiu-jitsu practitioner. That's your identity, and people hold on to it for dear life. People live and die for their identity. And the moment you rip somebody's identity without replacing it with something of value to them, then psychologically you're sending somebody into an incredible amount of trauma. So to answer your question, what people are letting go of is a very airtight sense of identity. That's how they identify themselves, and that's how they label themselves. And you psychologically, we just cannot take that away without responsibly replacing it with someone else, because then they spin, and what ends up happening is they can actually hold on to something even more consequential, even more severe, even more on the fringe, even more something that will affect you on an even more intense level. And therefore, you have to replace it responsibly with something else.
Good news. I'm no longer a flat earther, but I'm now reading all of the Unabomber's documents.
Exactly.
And
Exactly. Exactly. Exactly.
so as you point out, or as you pointed out, this is incredibly time consuming. But assuming that you're willing to take that time, how does one go about incepting a new identity or guiding them towards, I don't know, hey, instead of flat earth, why don't you consider compulsive exercise? Hey, instead of flat earth, how about you consider animal rights? Instead of flat earth, how about, I don't know, researching the history of the Byzantium Empire or whatever? I don't know where that came from, but you can't really tell someone what their next identity is going to be.
Very good. Very good. And we don't actually, because the most powerful force in the world is experience. There's something really magical about experience. If somebody had to come to you, Stephan, I mean, you've had extensive experience in jiu-jitsu, and somebody said to you, hey, uh, how can I tell if I like jiu-jitsu or not? So I've never done it before. How do I tell whether I like jiu-jitsu or not? You're not going to open up the whiteboard and go, these are the pros of jiu-jitsu and these are the cons of the jiu-jitsu, because that is pretty useless, because there might be more pros to doing it and I might not like it. There might be more cons to doing it and I might actually love it. The magic and what you're going to tell me is go and try it out. Go and try it out. Go and experience it, and that's when you'll feel whether you can resonate with that activity or whether you can't resonate with that activity. So what we do, by the way, in extreme cases where we need to replace somebody's identity, and we do it in therapy all the time. I am a depressive. I am an anxious person. I am not good enough. I'm a loser. I'll never amount to anything. I can never be in a relationship. I'm anti-commitment or commitment phobic. People come into therapy with really broken down and unhelpful identities that we have to replace. What happens a lot in therapy, if you don't replace that identity, as I said, you actually send somebody into a whirlwind and emotional chaos, and then they sometimes latch on to even worse identities. So your question is, how do we replace it? We always replace it with an experience. So somebody comes to you and says, oh, I believe X, whatever that X is. So let's just even take the flat earthers. I believe I'm a flat earther, or that's my belief. I'm not going to say to you, well, let's replace that belief with another belief. I'm going to say, okay, great, listen, I'm going to my tennis social tonight. Why don't you come with? Why don't you come with? And I know that once they resonate with my tennis social as an analogy, this person is going to interact with people that share different beliefs to the one that he believes or she believes about the flat earth, and suddenly he can identify with the tennis, and the identity changes as well. So we get people to experience an alternative identity that they can marry.
There's two places I'd like to go with that, Hanan. The first is, I think most people would like to say, I am open to changing my opinion. I'm not dogmatic. If I have new facts, I'll change my mind. That's probably what most people would like to say about themselves. And I have seen facts change people's minds. And there are some flat earthers or whoever who have been argued out of flat earth by, okay, well, look at this experiment, look at this, you can test it for yourself. And so what percentage of people that deeply held belief, which I'm going to pejoratively label a crazy belief, which you're going to take offense to, but hey, we're separated by about 12,000 kilometers, so it's hard for us to get in a physical confrontation about this. what percentage of people who've got a strongly vested identity can be argued out of that with facts or with demonstrations or with proof? I'm imagining it's a pretty small number. It's smaller than most people would like to think.
Right. So let me just say, first of all, you can label people in whichever way you want, and that's great. But you're not going to be able to change people's minds the moment you put them in a box that they don't like.
This is just you and
So,
me. This is just you and me. I mean, I have, when I'm making big statements, I do snap sometimes when I'm talking with people on social media. I'm human, but so long as it's a reasonably good faith, reasonably polite conversation, I have had many decent conversations, and I don't go to that labeling. I'm just saying that flat Earth is, there are ideas out there that are so removed from the mainstream that they are almost certainly not true. And I'm going to call those crazy ideas without calling those people crazy to their face.
Mhm.
But
Right. Right. I understand that.
yeah.
But again, like if I take somebody like, let's go back to the flat earther. If somebody sits in front of me and says I'm a flat earther, the truth is, in my personal world, if it's inconsequential, then I don't invest time and energy into it because it doesn't make me, debating this person does not make me a better father, a better husband, a better psychologist, a better son, a better brother. It just doesn't make me better. And I don't invest in things that don't make me better. But let's just say it was consequential. Then I would go, right, what are you about to give away if we let go of that, and why are you holding on to that belief? So we would engage in a conversation. I want to know about this person and understand. Listen, I get that most people are going to watch this and go, who has time for, nobody has time for this. You're a psychologist. You have time to see somebody one-on-one for a period of time so you can get into it. I'm not going to get into it. But the truth is, you should, if that person means something to you and if their decision is consequential to your livelihood and your well-being. So you definitely should. And I want to shift everybody's perspective, and I'll get to your question in a second. And instead of, again, just shaming people, and by the way, I've had people on social media that were ugly. I don't want to get into a conversation. People want to get into an altercation. And those are the people that I block. I don't want to have anything to do with you because you're not in this to have a hearty debate and a conversation where we kind of come up with a workable solution. You're here to attack, and I'm not interested. So I hear you. So your question was, what percentage of people are going to be changed by facts? And those are the people that are looking for facts. And it's a lot of people. So you might think that people probably on your social media are not coming in and looking for facts, perhaps. And that's why you give them facts and they're like, well, and then they become perhaps resentful or angry. But if somebody's looking for facts and you feed them the oxygen that they need, you will convert them. You will convert someone who you're going to feed the thing that they need. But if you shove something down somebody's throat that they don't need and didn't ask for, they will rebel and resent.
Okay. I mean, I definitely have changed. I definitely have had those conversations around facts. But you're right. Those were people who were asking for facts. Sometimes it's a disingenuous asking for facts. Yeah. Hey, I'm just asking questions, and let me cut and paste my 85 points here that I copied off some blog. I'm just asking questions. Well, I don't have an infinite amount of time, and I don't think
Right.
this is a genuine conversation, but that does happen a fair bit. Can we just wrap up here by talking about this idea of experience, which versus kind of trust in knowledge derived from outside of experience? There was in the early days of the COVID pandemic, there was this amazing analogy of like, hey, don't go outside the city walls. There are Mongols out there. What? I don't see any Mongols. No, they're just over the hill. Yeah, but I don't see any Mongols. I'm going to go outside. Yeah, but if you open the city gates, the Mongols are going to come in and kill us all. Well, I don't see any Mongols. I'm going outside. And this one person who doesn't see any Mongols is operating 100% from personal experience and the other person is operating based off of another source of knowledge, whether that's right or wrong. Right? One is kind of like knowledge coming in from other people. The other person is operating from knowledge that they derive themselves. And in jiu-jitsu, so much of our experience is personally derived. You might say, hey, this is a great, sweep. And I try it, and I try it, and I try it. It never works for me. It never works for me. Screw it. This isn't for me. I'm using my personal experience. But other people would say, well, let's look at the world championships. And in, 100 matches, this sweep was used 10 times to win a match. I'm going to take that knowledge that's coming from not my personal experience, but the knowledge that's coming from without. Are those two different personality types? When do people, or why do people, why are there some people who are saying, I don't know anybody who's died of COVID, whereas other people are saying, look at Italy, look at Iran, look at Tennessee, look at Saskatchewan. And those they're getting their information in two entirely different ways, and they're glomming onto one or the other.
Right. So, Stephan, I hope I'm answering your question, but nothing beats personal experience, personal visceral experience. And when I say visceral, going back to our previous, what we were previously talking about, a visceral experience, an experience that threatens a need on the hierarchy, a very high need on the hierarchy. So I need oxygen. You're about to take it away. I'm going to have a visceral experience, a very, very primitive bodily experience. If you take away my food, well, it's much lower down on my hierarchy. It doesn't really matter. Certainly, I might have an experience that you might be taking away from me, but because I don't need it as much as I do need oxygen, that doesn't impact me as much. So the typical story of the smoker that's been smoking for 20 years, you give them all the facts. This is what's going to happen to you. You have a responsibility as a father to be healthy for your kids. This is what's happening to your lungs. This is what's happening to your heart. This is what's happening to your blood pressure. You give them all the facts. No one cares. No one cares unless you show them an X-ray of their lungs currently. Because the moment you make that experience real and personalized for them, then they can create that cognitive dissonance and remove themselves from it. It won't happen to me because I know that old granny that lived to 103, she's been smoking for 17 years, and look at her. And look at John. John died of a car accident. He didn't smoke a day in his life. So why shouldn't I smoke? So people have incredible cognitive ways of bullshitting themselves into any position that they wish. And in order to make somebody really have an experience, make it visceral and relevant to their needs. So going back to COVID, when we show people pictures, videos of, never mind strangers getting sick in a hospital somewhere in the corner of the universe that they'll never visit, we show them pictures of people that they know, or videos of people that they know lying in bed coughing their lungs out because they're struggling with COVID and they weren't vaccinated. Now suddenly that hits home. Suddenly that's no longer a number, that's a name of a person that I know. And that becomes a much more visceral experience. So if you want to create an experience for somebody, ask yourself what is on their hierarchy of needs and go and challenge that.
I guess that's kind of taking us back to Stalin with, the death of one person being a tragedy, but the death of 1 million people being a statistic.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
But so are you saying there are no people who stop smoking because they take a look at the mortality charts and go, oh, I've got statistically, I'm going to lose this many years of life if I don't stop, and I'm just going to stop here, that they don't need to be shown the X-ray? Are you saying that what motivates those people who change their mind based on not experience?
Right, that's that just great question. And I'm not saying that you can't change people's minds with facts, but as long as those facts target the thing that they need the most. So for example, if I'm a smoker And my greatest need is to be able to play soccer with my boys into my 50s, 60s, 70s. Now you, Stephan, come along and say, let me share something with you. If you're going to keep on smoking, your need for playing soccer with your boys in 20 years' time, that is all gone. Now, suddenly that has a much more visceral effect on me, much more experiential effect than you going, let me tell you the mortality rate of somebody that smokes. So, yes, facts can definitely change opinions. There's no question. But we mustn't
Which facts?
exactly,
Which? Yeah.
exactly. We mustn't underestimate the human mind's ability to bullshit itself into any position. You can prove to me anything, but if it doesn't apply to what I need, I'm going to immediately reject it and I'll justify doing so.
Now, I know you're a psychologist, not a prognosticician, but it's where do you see this giant tribal divide? And I think it's fair to say that society is more tribally divided now than it was, say, 5 years ago or 10 years ago. It probably hasn't been this divided since the 1960s, if I had to guess. Where do you see this going? And I guess it's a sociology question, it's not a psychology question. But not speaking as a professional, speaking as Hanan, how do you think this plays out in 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 years' time?
So I don't think the divide between us has gotten less. I think as our positions are threatened more, the divide becomes more because we hold on to what secures our survival. I don't know if it's happened in Canada, but when the pandemic hit, people started hoarding toilet paper in this country. And people started going to shops and just cleaning out the shelves. Because the moment your survival is threatened, that's when we hold on to our position and our tribe even more so. Because the primitive brain kicks in and it holds on to what's familiar, what gives you that sense of protection and survival. So if I had to guess what's going to happen to our sense of tribalism, it's naturally for the next million years, it's naturally going to go up and down as our sense of security is going to be threatened. So now the pandemic, will take control of it, and our sense of tribalism will go down, and we'll connect on soccer, we'll connect on Manchester United, and then suddenly our sense of survival and safety is going to be threatened, and then we'll hold on to our positions a bit more. I don't think we can take away the fact that we hold on to people and things that are similar and familiar to us. That's primitive. And that's not going anywhere. I think the aim needs to be on what you tend to focus on. I'm a big believer of a concept called the law of focused intent. And Stephan, for example, if I invite you to my home, and as you drive to my home, you get to my house, I'll ask you, how many red cars did you see on the road? You're going to say, red cars. I can't think of any. But if I ask you to be aware of all the red cars before you started your drive, you'd probably pick 50. 50, you didn't attract 50. 50 were always there. But the fact that you were focused and intentional about it is what brought it up to awareness. The brain is the most amazing supercomputer on earth. It can work out the most intricate and the most in-depth calculations, but it can't do two simple things at the same time. It could do one thing really well, but it can't do two simple things at the same time. So if I ask you, Stephan, spell your name backwards and multiply 7 by 2.3 at the same time, your brain goes into an error. Can't do it. Can't do two simple things at the same time. When we're looking for a street sign, we turn down the radio because your brain can't focus on the street sign and the music that's being played. Your brain cannot do two simple things at the same time. And the reason why I bring it is because your brain can't focus on the red cars and on the blue trucks. It can't focus on two things at the same time. It can either focus on the red cars or on the blue trucks. And the answers that you get from life is dependent on the questions that you ask. If I wake up every morning and I go, why does my life suck? Well, I'm going to pick up all the red cars. If I go, why am I the luckiest person on planet Earth? I'll pick up on all the blue trucks. So my point to you is tribalism is going nowhere, but I want us to be very conscious actors in what we tend to focus on, what we tend to be tribal about.
Okay. So then, I mean, unless we get into a soccer riot, if you're a Manchester United supporter and I'm a, I don't know, Real Madrid, it's unlikely to have major consequences in our life. So we can be tribal in that little area, and it
Exactly.
could be some fun ball breaking, but it is not going to divide society as much.
All right, it's inconsequential. It's inconsequential. Invest your time into things that create value, but with the tribalism is obviously is consequential. It serves no utility. As a matter of fact, it takes value away from you. That's what you should start focusing on, the blue trucks.
Okay. Uh, is there anything that I should have asked you and I didn't, or is there any comments on the current situation that you'd like to make here in closing? Because psychology is not something that I'm very well versed in, so I don't know if I've guided this conversation in a way as optimally as it could have gone. So what have I missed here, and what would you like to finish with?
Perhaps a message of, I think, first of all, I think you did a phenomenal job. It was a real pleasure. Um, I mentioned everything that I feel has value and has utility, I think, for your listeners. Perhaps what I'd like to just mention is, in line with what I call the law of focused intent, pick your battle. Pick your battle. I use this analogy. I say the common denominator between me, you, a successful and an unsuccessful person is that we all have 24 hours in the day. 24, 24, 24, 24. A successful person invests his time into things that create value. An unsuccessful person sleeps 18 hours in the day, invests his time into things that create zero return on investment. You and I will wake up every morning with 100 units of energy, 100 coins. I call this the coin theory. Spend your coins wherever you wish and however way you wish. Once those coins are up, your body goes good night and you wake up the next morning with another 100. The problem is when you run out of coins by 12 o'clock in the afternoon, you still have 10 hours in the day, but now you're functioning at a deficit, and then something has to give. Your health, your resiliency, your ability to see opportunities, and pick where you invest your coin, because the coins that I'm going to give to the flat earther and trying to convince them that the earth is round and I might not, those are not the 20 coins that I can give to my kids. And those are not the 20 coins that I can give to my wife. And those are not the 20 coins that I can give to what I'm passionate about, jiu-jitsu, let's just say. People have this fallacy of believing that they've got unlimited coins and I can spend it frivolously wherever I wish. It's not true. Eventually, you run out of coins, and again, something will have to give. So be very cognizant of what your carrot is, because I always say my favorite quote of all time is, "If you are not the chess player of your life, you're a pawn in someone else's." If you don't have clear direction, you will naturally live out somebody else's direction. Even worse, you'll live out being directionless. So pick your direction, pick your carrot, pick the thing that you want to chase the most. Not only will it give you structure and a sense of purpose, but also to allow you to maximize the coins and make you way more efficient with the coins that you have in the day.
Okay. Well, I think that is amazing advice for anybody in any situation at any time. So I thanks for sharing that. If people want to find out more about you, or if they're in South Africa and want to see you personally, how do they do that?
So the best way is to follow me on social media. So Instagram is Dr. Hanan Bushkin. So Dr. Dr. Hanan Hanan, Bushkin Bushkin, Dr. Hanan Bushkin. Facebook as well, and just my email address. If somebody has any specific question that they want to ask, with absolute pleasure, I'm always open to having a fruitful, robust debate. If somebody wants to just shove an idea down my throat, I will block and delete you. This is not some. I don't run this woke culture of anything goes. If you want to have a debate, I'm happy. If you don't, then don't email me. But if you do, the email address is Hanan Hanan at atclinic.co.za. So Hanan at atclinic.co.za.
And AT Clinic is your business?
Yeah, so anxiety and trauma clinic. So AT stands for anxiety and trauma. So A for anxiety, T for trauma clinic. So atclinic.co.za.
Okay. Well, thank you so much for today. What time is it there in South Africa?
7:30 at night.
Okay. So it's at 10:30 in the morning here. So
Oh,
it's
great. Good morning.
kind of amazing that we can have this conversation around the other side of the world, isn't it?
Absolutely, absolutely. And thank you very much for having me. It's been an absolute pleasure. And yeah, I've enjoyed it tremendously.
Okay. Take care, my friend.
You too.